Yet many in recent history have continued to separate people into distinct groups, as if we were different enough to form separate subspecies. Because the word races implies such a misleading idea, in this class we'll use the term racial groups to refer to the way we've separated groups based on a few visible genetic traits. Yet even those superficial stereotypes of regional biology don't always work, as this Indian man, who would usually be labeled Asian, is far darker than this San woman of Botswana, who would often be called black. Racial labels are often applied to whole continents or global regions. This photo project made amalgamated pictures of many different women to show a rough average of what people look like in specific parts of the world. The stereotypical looks of a white person can be seen in northwestern Europe, but moving just a bit south and east, some features start to change. What exactly separates one racial group from another gets more difficult as you look more closely, as does exactly where you draw the line geographically. The looks that we associate with a so-called race, if anything, represent the farthest corners of the globe. In between is a wide array of gradually changing features. The average look of people of sub-Saharan Africa ranges greatly, and is not necessarily any darker than the people of southern Asia and the Pacific. This doesn't even take into account that, as we are all one species, we've been migrating, intermarrying, and having children across national and racial borders for all of human history. In which group would you place these two American women? Increasingly, Americans are recognizing themselves as interracial. Yet race remains a powerful label that we place on people. Our concepts of race, while based around biological features, exist in our culture far more than in our genes. The process of racial formation is how we construct these categories. Today in America, we largely see anyone of European descent as white, yet at one time our racial formulation placed people from different parts of Europe into different racial groups, white Europeans being the dominant group in United States history. Irish and Italians were seen as outsiders into the 20th century. As people of African descent have been an important part of the population since the country's founding, there have always been what we now call interracial Americans. We'll talk about the issues of racial caste inequality later in the semester, but for now, remember that even cultural ideas about what makes a person black are social constructions that have changed over time. Social constructionism is a micro-level theory that I'd generally consider part of interactionism, the idea that individuals build social structures through shared actions and understandings. Reality is a social construction that is real because we mutually believe that it is real. So, two people may be genetically more similar to each other than others in their respective racial groups. But if we've constructed our racial formation to place them in different groups, then the Thomas theorem predicts that society really does separate them. This is why our cultural assumptions can be such a powerful bias in social research. So is there any objective, meaningful difference between different groups of people beyond our social constructions? Missy Elliott and Garth Brooks are American musical artists, both shown here behaving symbolically with the clothes they wear, both American styles, yet both also originating from different groups within this land. Although we haven't been separated long enough as humans to develop significant differences genetically, we've seen that an individual can adapt culturally within their own lifetime. In that case, several generations of people living in the same area, learning from one another and adapting to the same conditions, could easily develop significant cultural differences from outside groups. This is what we traditionally call an ethnicity, although that term is often used interchangeably with race. Ethnic groups refer to people who share a national origin and/or certain key cultural traits, such as language, not any specific genetic differences. Being from the same place may mean some common features, and being part of the same racial group, but culture is the key thing that ties together an ethnic group. We refer to people from the islands of Japan who speak Japanese as Japanese people, or Nihonjin, in their own language. Japanese culture has some unique traditions, including the kimono and sushi. Yet ethnic groups, like racial groups, are still in many ways a social construction. Your group status has as much to do with the labels others apply to you as it does with your own family's actual origin. Cultures change, separate, merge, and overlap. People from specific countries in Central and South America and the Caribbean often self-identify their ethnicity as the particular country they're from. Yet many also identify with a larger ethnic group of Latino, being from the areas known as Latin America, or Hispanic, being from Spanish-speaking countries. Some struggle to be accepted as their own ethnic group because they aren't part of the expected racial group. Africans, who were brought over as slaves, were often separated from their particular ethnic groups, but also often segregated from the dominant European groups as well. Even among the Japanese, a more precise identity, there are the native Ainu people, who identify themselves as their own ethnic group. As much as an ethnic grouping can identify common heritage, the actual cultural traits of that heritage may not carry through to younger generations that have migrated away from their family's home country. This is often where hyphenated identities come in. A Japanese person raised in the United States may identify as both Japanese American or, more broadly, Asian American. For racial, ethnic, and many other ways that we label groups of people, social expectations may go far beyond any actual cultural or biological features. Stereotypes are broad generalizations applied to everyone identified as part of a certain group. Some may be based on actual cultural traits, but many others are created or manipulated through media. In many cases, they're tied into historical situations, those same vicious cycles of structuration W.E.B. Du Bois was trying to break. Next time, we'll talk in more detail about some of the cultural elements that distinguish various cultural groups, but it's important to keep in mind that even if there is any truth to a specific stereotype about a certain group, such as the traditional Chinese clothing depicted here, those traditions may no longer exist, at least among a particular individual or group.